Hello everybody. In this video we are going to talk about the use of the final keyword in inheritance. Now in our earlier lectures we have already seen that the final keyword can be used with data members of a class, and when we use the final keyword with data members of a class, it becomes a constant whose value cannot be changed. Now in addition to the use of this keyword with data members, we can also use it with class methods and also with classes. So let us see what are the different uses of this final keyword. So there are three uses of the final keyword. First, final for data members, which we have already discussed. Then final for methods and final for class. So let's start with data members, which we already know. So here I have a class called SumClass with a data member A, and this has been preceded by the keyword final. So what happens? A now becomes a constant which is initialized to 10. So this is the final keyword for data members. So when you add the keyword final for a data member, it becomes a constant. In case of methods also, we can use the final keyword. Now what happens when you have inheritance? You have a subclass and you have a superclass. And if both the subclass and the superclass has a method with the same signature, so method name is the same, the return type is the same, the number and the type of arguments are also same. So if they have the same signature, then the subclass method overrides the method of the superclass, which we have again already discussed in our earlier lectures. Now, if we don't want this to happen, that is, we don't want the superclass method to be overridden in the subclass. In that case, in the method of the superclass, we can precede it with the keyword final. So when we do that, the method which has been preceded with the final keyword cannot be overridden in a subclass anywhere in the hierarchy. So that is the use of the final keyword in inheritance. It does not allow overriding by the subclass. Now already we have seen private data members are not accessible in the subclasses. Similarly, static methods also you cannot override. That is because they are implicitly final. So even if you don't add the keyword final, by default when you make a method as private or static, it cannot be overridden in the subclass. Okay. So that is the final when we use it for methods. Now why do we need this? Okay. As you are aware that whenever we have method overriding, in that case, the compiler, whenever it comes across a method call, it starts its search from the subclass and it goes up the hierarchy till it finds a definition for that particular method. Now, if a method has been declared as final, it means that it cannot be overridden. So the compiler at compile time itself, it knows what is the code that is to be executed whenever this method is called. So in such a situation, the compiler can optimize the code by just taking the code for some method and placing it in the method call for some method. It does not have to search for a definition. So that is an optimization which is done by the compiler, and the final keyword helps it to do this. Now, the final keyword can also be used with classes. So when we declare a class as final, in that case, it cannot be a superclass, which means, in other words, we can say that a class which is final cannot be inherited by another class. So you cannot have subclasses of a final class. And And by default, all the methods in a final class are by default they are final. So they cannot be overridden. Of course, there is no question of overriding because you don't have a superclass. You cannot have a subclass for a final class. So by default, all methods are final. So this is about the keyword final. Let us see some examples. So we'll move to a program here. So this is the same program we have discussed for constructors and as well as for method overriding. So here I have a class. Let me just change it a little bit. So I have a class called employee with all these things, and then I have a method called display, void display, which is printing the first name and last name. Then I have a class faculty which extends employee. So it is a subclass. Faculty is a subclass of employee. And in faculty also I have a method called display, which is printing again the first name, last name, department and the salary of the faculty. So when you see this, whenever we are calling, okay, you can see here we are calling the method display with E. Now E is of type employee. So what happens? The display method of employee is executed. And when we call the display method with S is an object of class faculty. So the display method of faculty gets executed. So let's execute this and see first. So I have to save it first. Then let's go to the command prompt. So let's compile. Okay, done. Compile. Let's run this. So you can see it's working fine. Alright. So the first display is displaying the first name and last name of employee, and the second display is displaying the name, department and salary of the faculty. Let us make a change in our program and add the keyword final. So we go back to our notepad, and here let us make the display method here as final. Rest, we are keeping everything same. So let's go back to command prompt. Compile this, try compiling this again. So there you get an error. What the error says, display in faculty cannot override display in employee. Overridden method is final. So we are trying to override display in employee by display in faculty. So this is not allowed because the method that we are trying to override is final. So we cannot override a final method. Now let's go back and let's make the class as final now. So now let me make this final. So let's save. So now the class employee is final, but we are still trying to inherit from the class. So let's see what happens. So it should give me a compilation error. So let me compile. So there it is. It says two errors. One is cannot inherit from final employee. Cannot inherit from final employee. So employee class is final, so we cannot inherit from it. And the second error is of course this previous error only. That is display in faculty cannot override this because overridden method is final. So here in this example program, you can see that over the final keyword when applied to methods and classes, you cannot override a final method and you cannot inherit from a final class. So the keywords final with method and classes are useful only in case of inheritance, not otherwise. On the other hand, final keyword with data members is useful everywhere. So that is all about the final keyword.